If you partake in creepy content on YouTube, you're probably familiar with a project by the name of I Can't Sleep. This series of animations is one of the most hauntingly beautiful projects on the internet. Its visuals, themes, and story are completely unmatched. The series is very cryptic and employs the use of symbolism very, very heavily, which has led to many people being very confused as to what's actually going on in these uploads. This video will be an analysis and explanation of the story so far, following from where we last left off in my first video on the topic. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest watching that first, since this video is a direct sequel. To quickly summarize the story so far, we follow an unnamed girl who we will be referring to as Helena. Since her childhood, Helena's been haunted and stalked by a shadowy figure who we will be calling Azrael. Azrael seems to be a representation of Helena's abuse and trauma, and has followed her throughout her entire life, in her waking life, alongside her dreams. When Helena was a child, Azrael wasn't shown to be directly harming her, but as time passed, encounters with him became more and more horrific. She ends up witnessing a wide variety of horrifying monsters and entities, with it not being directly clear if they are in her head or they are actually there. Eventually, Helena can't take it anymore and tries to end it all, but doesn't. In almost every video, she's shown being horribly harmed or maimed, with many of them alluding to prior SA. Most of these encounters have been in the form of nightmares, which leads Helena to decide that the best way to avoid this is to just not sleep at all. However, even in her waking life, she is still haunted, leading her to question the reality of any of this by using a phone camera to see if a monster on the subway is real or not. Said monster doesn't appear on camera, adding a layer of uncertainty to the events portrayed. I Can't Sleep takes place in the mid-2000s, with it being an almost perfect representation of what emo animations were like at the time. The channel segments its videos into different playlists. In my first video, I covered both the childhood and nightmare playlist. Now with that out of the way, let's continue the story of I Can't Sleep. One of my favorites of the I Can't Sleep playlist is creepypasta. Creepypasta consists of 7 incredibly cool mini adaptations of classic creepypastas, like Dolls, The Girl in the Photograph, Home Alone, The Portraits, Eyeless Jack, Slender Man, and Smile Dog. In these videos, Helena is seen as depicting the role of the protagonist of these classic stories, often meeting a gruesome end. I especially love this little scene in Home Alone where Helena is channel surfing and skips by mouse.exe and Red Mist. From what I can tell, this playlist probably isn't canon to the rest of the overarching story, but could be a representation of Helena's fear of these creepypastas, getting involved with her nightmares. Something I should know is that despite the character being nameless, as the channel's grown in popularity, the fans have coined a name for her, and that is Nia, as a reference to insomnia. I personally love this name for her, but to be consistent with part 1, I'll continue to refer to her as Helena. The next playlist of note compiles the channel's first multi-part series, that being Don't Get Your Hopes Up. Part 1 of Don't Get Your Hopes Up opens on black. A white hallway with a shadowy figure at the bottom end of it stands directly towards the camera. As the hallway gets closer, we see that that figure is that of Azrael's. Once the hall is fully in frame, it cuts to text saying, "Do not get your hopes up." And then we see Helena waking up, seemingly in school, making it obvious that what we just saw was the beginning of a nightmare. In the next part, she checks the time and goes back to what seems to be her dorm, leading me to believe that Helena is around college age at this point. This is the first time we've seen any indication of how old she actually is, so keep that in mind going forward. The lights go out and she hears a figure standing in the darkness. Once the light comes back, the figure is gone, in a clear homage to the classic horror short Lights Out. Helena looks away, only to be met with Azrael towering over her. She attempts to flee but gets grabbed by the head. Shortly after this, a loud distorted screaming can be heard, while black and red visions flash. Notable frames from this are what looks to be a demonic pentagram, a heart rate monitor, which is something that we've seen when Azrael shows up in the past. In some frames, it looks like the monitor, alongside 2 figures, spells out the word pain. We're also shown X-ray scans of a human brain, flashing back and forth with the pentagram, alongside Japanese text that roughly translates to "Glory to the Sutra," which seems to be a Buddhist chant of some sort. The Lotus Sutra being an incredibly influential Buddhist teaching, which encourages one to engage with even the most mundane things in life actively. Obviously, that's a very abridged synopsis of it, but we'll keep that in mind. After this ends, Helena's figure becomes fully red and limp, until she wakes up in school once again. Part 3 plays out the same, until the lights turn off. Helena ends up running for her life, and eventually escapes into a room that she perceives to be safe. A crimson red sword comes from between the 2 doors and stabs her in the chest. Text reading, "No resurrection without crucifixion" is shown, this being an obvious reference to the Bible. And then Helena, once again, wakes up in school. This text is interesting, as I Can't Sleep heavily employs crucifix symbolism, which many perceive as a representation of religious trauma. Part 4 plays out the same, only instead of holding herself against the doors, Helena keeps moving until she feels something drop on her head. Above her, in an incredibly cool camera transition, it's revealed that a horrific writhing creature is coming from the ceiling. It lowers its red tendrils down and consumes Helena. The way this creature looks and moves is pretty similar to the creatures that we saw in Hell previously. In part 5, the opening shot is from much higher, and the events play out at a much faster pace. Once Helena makes it to the room, she realizes it's a dead end and can't do anything but get down and cover. The tentacles lower, but they don't grab her this time. Instead, the creature lowers a crucifix. The shape of said crucifix is similar to the video Punishment 2. I believe the crucifix could be a representation of Helena symbolically paying for her sins. I personally see it as a representation of the guilt that survivors of abuse often carry. So many awful things have been done to her throughout her life, and because of that, she may feel guilt or ownership over those things. The crucifix could represent a sort of divine punishment. If we're gonna look even deeper into this, when we see Helena crucified, there are 11 other crucified people surrounding her. 11 is an angel number, and essentially represents a reminder to trust your intuition, to trust what your gut instinct is telling you. When people's consent gets violated, a lot of the time it's a result of coercion or manipulation. If someone's continuously insistent on relations after you've denied them, and eventually something happens after you're beaten down into agreeing, it can feel like your own fault because the entire time you knew it was wrong or that you didn't want it. If we all acted on instinct, we'd be able to avoid a lot of scenarios that ultimately are harmful. So this could signify a deeper meaning to the symbolism. The creature coming from the ceiling is almost like a deep part of her mind, telling her that she needs to take responsibility for the things that have been done to her. Don't Get Your Hopes Up is an incredible little narrative, and it only gets better from there. The next playlist is titled Insanity. This playlist will be shown as one full narrative rather than individual videos. Helena is strapped to a table naked. Her privates are covered by straps. Her mouth is taped and her legs and arms are strapped to the table. She looks around, horrified. We then open on a peaceful looking angel. Her wings are spread and a love heart beats on her chest. Immediately it cuts to Helena getting injected with a green substance by a tall man in a lab coat. Her eyes close halfway. She sees visions of cute little ghost looking figures, one of which turns into the same angel from her prior encounter. This time she's naked. It then cuts to Helena on the same table that we saw her on in the first place, only this time she has an IV bag in her wrist, an oxygen or sedative mask on her face, and what seems to be a catheter. She's disheveled and looks to be in pain. The next thing we see is a doll-looking figure facing the audience in a dark white tiled room, a small hatch on the door being the only source of light. The intimidating figure of a man shows up and looks into the room. He opens the door, and the next thing we see is the doll mask on the floor ripped with blood covering the face. Above it, the girl's feet spasm. We're shown the outside of what appears to be the institution or hospital the past few videos have taken place in. Two masked characters are looking up at the building, and then at each other. They proceed to break into the institution and pull out their flashlights, making me think they're either urban explorers or some sort of extraction duo. As they walk through the halls, one decides to look up through the window, while the other provides him light. Above the one with the flashlight, a creepy hand emerges and snatches him. In a moment of silence, the other masked character is alone, until a ghostly skull quickly approaches him. In the final shot, we see said skull creature looking out of the same window. After a cut to black, we see Helena hunched over, breathing heavily. An arrow appears over her head. She follows it. She comes across some graffiti written in Japanese that translates to run away. Helena keeps walking until eventually she stops. We see a figure, likely Helena, getting a syringe injected straight into their head. It ends on the skull looking out of the window once again. Next we see Helena, she's in hospital garb, partaking in a recreation of the old viral video by the name of Japanese Horse WTF Get Down, which as you can see is just a goofy old internet video. But when Helena's in this situation, it's not so fun. For the first 3 frames, she's fine. But at the same point where the original video freaks out, she does the same. Blood gets strewn across the background and the screen. When it ends, she's exhausted and breathing heavily. Next we see is the inside of the same cell holding the doll-masked girl. Drawings are scratched on the wall. The first few that we see are pretty innocent, but as the camera pans down, we see them get considerably darker. Something of note is Japanese text scratched on the wall that translates to older sister, next to what appears to be a skeletal angel. Once again, the little hatch on the door opens up, and the girl's face gets illuminated, her eye resembling the ones that we've seen haunting Helena throughout this entire series. Eventually, a pair of hands grab onto the latch. An incredibly disheveled and creepy looking Helena pulls herself up to see into the cell. Next thing we see is Helena waking up in a bed that she's strapped down to. However, she's not fully awake, but rather in a state of sleep paralysis. She looks out into the hallway where a tall black entity stands. Unable to move, she witnesses this creature loom over the bed of the person sleeping on the other side of the room. When the lights momentarily go out, the person and the creature are missing, replaced with a small puddle of blood on the pillow. Next thing we see, the creature is looming right next to Helena's bed, seemingly taking on the appearance of a doctor. He doesn't move, he just looms. The sound design in this video is especially haunting. We next see a memory, something we covered prior in Helena's childhood. This one's a lot less disturbing from the rest. We see Helena sitting alone, happily rocking back and forth. What appears to be the moon ends up blinking, and then when this happens, all the stars in the background end up looking more like a padded wall. So that was a lot, but What does any of it mean? Well, it gives us quite a lot of information. It seems like after Helena attempted to take her life, she was sent to a mental institution. Historically, mental institutions have treated their patients horribly, abusing them and in some cases experimenting on them. Helena was pumped full of drugs and sedatives while strapped there, and was likely abused by the staff, explaining why she's so disheveled and beat up. Helena wasn't the only one there. There was a younger girl, Helena's little sister, who too was abused by the staff. I believe the doll mask could be a representation of her innocence, which then gets ripped apart and violated by the man working there. Now, remember how I said the creepypasta videos weren't canon to the rest of the narrative? Well, I lied. Kind of. There's a character seen in the video Dolls who looks a bit like Helena's sister. In the videos, doctors remove her eyes and teeth, which could explain the mask. This could definitely also just be the main character of this creepypasta, but I think it's still worth noting. It seems to be implied that this institution is not operating lawfully, as it seems as though it was abandoned and then began to be used again. It likely held a reputation of being haunted, like many former insane asylums of today. This led urban explorers to break in and explore the place, only to be taken by whatever entities lurk there. Helena attempts to escape, but then gets caught and sedated. It seems as a punishment for trying to leave, she's forced to humiliate herself, recreating a viral video, which only leads to her getting more hurt. During her sleep paralysis, Helena sees a horrifically distorted visage of the very doctors that have been abusing her. She then sees back to her childhood, realizing that this may not have been her first time here. Oftentimes when it comes to childhood trauma, many will remember horrible things from their past in a way where they don't realize how bad it actually was. As a kid, you're not fully aware of everything that's happening, and the world is still so new and vast. And our innocence gives us a very different perspective from if we were to suffer through the same things in adulthood. To me, this represents that exact thing. Helena was just a kid, so she didn't see being trapped and monitored as anything too bad. Or alternatively, she was still trying to find joy through the pain, as most kids tend to do. This last video could also be what she felt like while being sedated. Helena's time being institutionalized was horrific and abusive, but eventually she was able to get out of the asylum and return to normal life. I'm going to assume roughly that the Insanity playlist takes place in her early teenage years, whereas Don't Get Your Hopes Up takes place later when she's an adult in college. The next playlist, titled Way Back Home, is another multi-part series. We open on Helena in the school bathroom, arcing her head over the sink, avoiding eye contact with the mirror. A bottle of pills, likely some sort of medication, is firmly grasped in her right hand. A ghastly face quickly appears in the mirror, but then disappears, resembling the same face that took the urban explorers in the institution. She eventually builds up the courage to look into the mirror and is met with a horrific bloody creature. Its hand grabs through the mirror. This only appears for a second though. She goes down the stairs and grabs what are likely the keys to her dorm. She looks out into the distance, horrified as she's met with nothing but an empty landscape. She's completely isolated. She looks back at her school, taking note of how most of the windows are boarded up with wooden planks, and there seems to be a storm closing in. She has no other choice but to walk to her destination. She walks through the woods, the massive trees looming over her intimidatingly. As she does this, through the trees, some sort of creature brushes by quickly. She stands and stares to the city, which seems to be miles away. She stands there, defeated. Her feet hurt, and she just wants to be home. We see the clothing of the creature blow in the wind, as it too looks over the city. Helena eventually gets to civilization, as we see a shot of her feet while she's walking. The second she crosses the fence into the city, she's back in the asylum clothes, wearing sandals and a straitjacket. Her hair is notably messier as well. It's shown that she's being escorted by asylum security, as the surroundings have changed to resemble that of the asylum's courtyard. As they're walking, Helena starts to have what seems to be flashbacks. We see her in dark red, distorting and stretching, until eventually she transforms back into her modern-day self. She's back in the city, there's no guard, but she's met with a dead end. She realizes that there's a puddle of blood below her that leads to a dark alleyway. A figure in said alleyway shifts away and makes a loud sound, alerting her to its presence. She looks at it horrified, as the camera pans to show more of this seemingly post-apocalyptic city. Atop one of the buildings, a piece of cloth resembling what we've seen following her flutters in the wind, drawing her attention away from the bloody trail. She's frozen and indecisive, until she hears loud booming church bells, which startle her deeply, bringing back imagery of a cross. She eventually decides to follow the red trail, stepping on the same footsteps. As she walks, she comes across a lot of graffiti, much of its symbolism repeating. We see eyeballs, crucifixes, and notably, spirals. As she walks further, the imagery gets creepier and creepier, with many of the spirals being scratched out. Handprints adorn the wall next to them. This whole time, the trail of blood gets smaller and smaller, and eventually, a bunch of eyeballs loom over her. After a while, the graffiti ends, and she ends up coming across what looks to be massive cages. As she walks, two almost horn-looking shapes appear on either side of her head, and strengthen in opacity as she walks. Eventually, she comes across a cage with fully broken bars, implying that someone was able to escape from whatever sick place she's in. Around her, a horrific hellscape is illuminated. Two bodies with missing limbs are strung by whatever appendages they still have left as they wriggle in agony. A single eyeball in the middle stares at Helena, its gaze unflinching, Helena, in fear, gets down to the fetal position and stays there until everything goes back to black. And that's it. The series ends. This one's really heavy, so fair warning. The inclusion of Helena's medication leads me to two things. Either she is out of her medication or has taken too much of it. I personally think that she is just out of meds, likely for schizophrenia. I'm led to believe this because of the video Subway 2, where she witnesses a monster on the subway, which ends up not actually being there. What she sees in the mirror could be a result of this. I think her fear around traversing back home is a pretty clear representation of the fear and anxiety that comes with walking alone as a woman. The boarded up school shows that the world that Helena roams is not safe, and that if she encounters anything dangerous out there, no one will come to help her. The figure that seems to be chasing her holds a strong significance to the narrative, but we'll get to that later. When she finally makes it back to the city, her clothing regresses back to what she wore when she was institutionalized. To me, this represents how she's perceived by the greater world. When she's being observed, she's seen as someone who needs to be locked up, a crazy person in need of a straitjacket. When the guard shows up, it only further enforces this. She can't be trusted alone. She herself is directly transported back to these times, with her trauma fully re-emerging. Luckily, she's able to snap out of the state and realign herself with her surroundings, but it seems that in her daze, she got lost and found herself at the dead end of the city. Already incredibly anxious, she has to choose whether or not to head back or follow the trail. When the church bells ring, she freezes. It's safe to assume she has a bad association with the church, so in a moment of fight or flight, she decides to follow the trail, tracing the footsteps as to not make new tracks. While walking through this alleyway, she crosses a bunch of symbols scratched onto the walls surrounding the cages, or prison cells. We see crosses, eyeballs, and spirals, who, from what I can tell, are a representation of abuse and child trafficking. The symbolism with the cross in this regard is pretty self-explanatory. Lots of horrible things have been known to be done to young boys in the church for years. Obviously, I won't go into detail, but it's pretty widely known information. This is further backed up by these spirals. According to a declassified FBI document, this spiral shape has been used by predators to signal to each other their preference for young boys. The symbol is intentionally designed to look like an innocuous thing that a kid would draw. It's completely despicable, and we don't have to go deeper into it. But judging by the context of the cages, the crosses, and the blood, I believe that that's what the spiral is symbolizing here. Now, let's be completely clear. These symbols don't perfectly line up. By no means am I saying that every spiral could be a predator dog whistle, but just given the context of this video, it seems like that's the message that's trying to be conveyed here. As she keeps walking, she sees what seem to be drawings of tentacles, which many of the prior monsters in this series have had, and have used against Helena. It's pretty clear that the creatures that have hurt Helena are representations of her pain and abuse, so the tentacles are likely a wider symbol of the abuse happening in this alleyway. The eyes that appear over her are likely showing us that she's being watched by whoever operates here. The horns that slowly appear could be alluding to possibly satanic rituals occurring here. When the lights turn on and the room is illuminated, the writhing figures with missing limbs could be victims having their body parts harvested by people who have kept them captive. The distorted audio that plays in the background when sped up sounds like it's saying something along the lines of Daddy won. Daddy could be whoever's behind the supposed trafficking. Unlike most other videos, Helena actually survives this one, with everything just cutting to black. Way Back Home is an incredible little series. It's heartbreaking, fascinating, and horrific, all at the same time. It further explores the disturbing world of I Can't Sleep, showing us more of the vacant city that Helena calls home. She's also not the only person to suffer from this abuse in the city. The city isn't safe. Neither is Helena. Keep this all in mind when we continue through the channel. The next and final playlist isn't of as much note. But before we cover that, it's time for a word from the sponsor that makes videos like this happen. This video is sponsored by Ekster. Ekster wallets are genuinely next level luxury products. With Ekster, you can say goodbye to your big bulky wallet. And you might be wondering, like, what is this? How is this a wallet? Well, let me show you. Let me show you where you keep your cards. That's the greatest thing ever. Not only is it super satisfying, but it's very practical. Not only that, but these wallets feature RFID blockers, which is very important if you want to keep your information safe. With an RFID blocker, you can prevent skimmers from stealing your credit card information, which I think is pretty cool. It just gets better. Ekster offers a Finder card, which is compatible with Find My on all Apple devices, and it fits perfectly into any of their wallets. With this, you will always know where your wallet is. It's incredible. Currently, Ekster's running a Father's Day sale until June 26th, which has up to 40% off. But if you use my code in the description, you can get up to 50% off. That's up to 50% off using code Raymundo2112 when you go to the link in the description. Thank you so much to Ekster for sponsoring this video. It starts with the sequel of the video, For Me. In case you don't remember, in For Me, Helena is given a rose by Azrael. The red of the rose then fills her up with red. This video takes place after, with Helena draining her arm of the color. The red leaves her as a rainbow, being collected into a bucket labeled For You. It drains until all the color has left Helena. I think the symbolism in this one's pretty obvious. When we covered this in part 1, my perception of the For Me video was that of Azrael manipulating Helena, a cycle of abuse. Sometimes he is kind, sometimes he is loving, but it's not genuine. It's in an attempt to keep Helena stuck. Her happiness is short-lived, as she quickly has to sacrifice the small amount of joy that she has, hence the For You bucket. The next video, Wrong Answer, will need to be censored as it's somewhat graphic. It features Helena hanging from a noose, urinating, while text in the background reads, "Wrong?" with a bunch of question marks surrounding it. This video doesn't give us a lot to work with, but I have a read on it. I believe this video is a representation of the way that one has to walk on eggshells around someone who's mentally abusive. One wrong answer to a question and it's your head on a pike. Only they don't make you directly feel that way. Rather, they make you feel bad about it, leading you to put the blame on yourself and endure the incoming torment in a way that they expertly make you feel is self-inflicted. That's why this video is framed as a question. It's not Helena saying, "Ha, you said the wrong thing, now I'm gonna hang myself." It's the manipulated self-injury as brought upon by the reaction of an abuser. The next video in the playlist is the longest so far. It's a looped animation of Helena in an elevator with Azrael going up. Throughout, Helena isn't scared. She isn't feeble. She just looks annoyed and determined, like she's sick of his shit. Azrael keeps hitting the 8th floor button, and each time he does that, it switches to a different angle of them. In the background, the song Remodeling from Silent Hill is played. In I Can't Sleep fashion, it's super compressed and gets louder as the video goes on. This just loops the entire time. This video seems to take place in the same elevator that we've seen before in the series, only this time it seems to be going up. In Matthew 28, the number 8 represents a new beginning, being referenced following the resurrection of Jesus Christ after his crucifixion. So we see Helena and the personification of everything that's hurt her and tormented her rising from hell to the 8th floor. Interesting. On Your Phone is the final playlist on this channel, so going forward we're going to be looking at everything that's been released since part 1. In the next video, titled Mom, we finally get a glimpse into Helena's family. Standing on the middle of the stairway, Helena's mom twitches and convulses back and forth. Her face is empty and void, resembling a Hell Valley skytree. This comes from the perspective of Helena, who's recording using the same phone that she used to record the woman on the subway. She's scared but remains brave. The next video, Mom's cat emoji, will require some heavy censorship, so I'm gonna get creative with how I describe this thing. The video starts with Helena's mom sitting in a chair, in nothing but her underwear and some fishnets. Held between her legs is a cute little cat head. The mom's face is scratched out, and Helena's standing in the doorway. The red dot appears once again, who in the past has been a signifier of some sort of oncoming horror. When it flashes back, the mom's face is covered by the face of what looks to be a screaming zombie kind of figure. Helena is then illuminated by the red, and simply stands there breathing idly. The mom then brings a knife from behind her and starts stabbing the cat face in the forehead. Each time, the wound grows until it's a bloody mess. The pinned comment from I Can't Sleep reads, "Is that really how it was?" This one's pretty self-explanatory. It seems that Helena, when she was too young to understand what was going on, walked in on her mother pleasuring herself. The sound and motion was perceived in her young mind to be that of her mother hurting herself in a way that Helena couldn't comprehend. The top comment further proves this with her questioning whether or not her recollection of the event was actually accurate to what happened. Another theory being suggested by the people in the comments is that this video depicts Helena witnessing her mother attempting to perform an abortion on herself. This would explain the blood. Assuming this attempt failed, it could explain why her little sister is always wearing a mask. Perhaps she was mangled by this attempt. But I personally have no idea how any of that would work, so don't quote me on that. The next time we see Helena's mom is in the video Mutter. It opens in a variety of shots, displaying the store that Helena works at. The store being one that holds a variety of mall goth apparel, like demonias, studded belts, alongside a collection of video games and movies of the early 2000s. While reading a book, Helena notices something outside the window. Two silhouettes, a tall and a short one. While staring at these visages, she comes to the grim realization that she's seeing her mother and her little sister. She rushes over to her sister, who is naked and malnourished. She looks back and realizes that this is all her mother's fault, and strikes her. Helena starts to take the mask off, but after seeing what's under, ties it back together, and then hugs her. Her shocked expression being a direct nod to the iconic Ivan the Terrible painting. While hugging her sister, an army of shadowy figures appear around them, seemingly being zombie-like in nature. She attempts to run with her sister, but realizes her feet have been injured, so she cradles her and makes a run for it, asking her mother, "Mom, where's father?" The mother doesn't look back. She just shuffles and responds,
"Dad's sleeping. Don't you remember?"
In a flash, Helena's back in the same lake where she first encountered Azrael, grasping her little sister with her life. As the horde slowly approaches, she yells, "Mom, help me kill them!" One of the creatures turns to face them as the mother responds,
"Kill them yourself."
This one has a lot to unpack, and it's my personal favorite of the I Can't Sleep videos. It's made very clear that Helena's mother was abusive and neglectful, and that her father seemingly disappeared from their lives. Given the fact that the little sister was also sent to the institution, it's safe to say that the mother sent both of their children because she was unable to parent alone. By untying the mask of her sister, Helena learns the true scale of the abuse that she's withstood. We saw a glimpse of this earlier when an asylum employee did some unspeakable things to her. Perhaps her mask was a cover for all the horrific mental and physical maiming she's been through. All the zombie-like figures I perceive as being men who have hurt Helena and her sister in the past, seemingly being men that her mother had brought into their lives. Helena asked for her father, seeing as he was probably the only one who had made her feel safe, and kept her protected. The mother's response implies that her father had passed away a long time ago, but she lied about it in an attempt to protect her daughters. Suddenly, Helena's in the very same spot where all of her abuse started all those years ago, forced to confront her tragic past alongside an army of men coming to hurt her. This time she has to be brave, she has to protect her little sister. The mother's response is one of the most heartbreaking things. She takes no accountability for the hurt that she's brought upon her children, and won't even try to help them, as the very people that she brought into their lives return to hurt them again. This video is genuinely incredible and deeply heartbreaking. And while it's made very clear that the character that we see is indeed Helena's sister, some viewers perceive it as a personification of Helena's childhood and innocence. She finally has a chance to protect the little girl inside of her from everything that her mother couldn't. Unzipping the mask could be her looking back at her childhood memories and seeing how dark things truly were. Being back at the lake where it all began could also be her getting a chance to change the way that her life played out. What's important to note is that Mutter came out before the final installment of Way Back Home. The sister's bloody feet match pretty well with the blood footprints that we see there, so she could possibly be one of the trafficking victims that we see stuck in the cages. The next time we see the mother character is in the video titled Stupid Fucking Horror. In the video, we see Helena cowering in the corner of her room as her mother enters down the stairs. She's in the same fishnets and lingerie that she wore in the cat video. A trail of blood drips down from her neck. She stumbles as she walks. I think it's pretty clear what this video is portraying. It's one of the few that are age restricted, so obviously it's heavily censored here. This video most likely depicts a traumatic memory from Helena's childhood, where her mother came home drunk late at night after being with one of her abusive partners. Whether the blood coming from her is literal or a representation of something else isn't completely clear, as we have seen sexual acts portrayed as gory in the past. Sticking with Helena's childhood, there have been 2 additions to the childhood playlist since our first time covering this series. The first edition is one by the name of Don't Blink. It opens on a clock showing that it's 11:30. She throws her socks onto a chair and sits alone in the corner of her room. She sits there, concerned, holding up her shirt to her face. After covering her eyes for a second, the room is dark and an eerie figure stands at the corner opposite to her. After blinking, more figures appear and get closer. Realizing this, she decides to keep her eyes open. The figures just loom over her. The camera angle switches to the opposite side of the room, and then the point of view blinks, leading to the figures to face the viewer. I think this video represents childhood fear that me and presumably many other people experienced, that being the fear of being alone in the dark and constantly being paranoid about the creatures that could appear if you weren't vigilant enough. This is a pretty common experience in the shower when you have to close your eyes, which we've seen represented in the series prior. In the next video, Labyrinth, a young Helena is standing at the entrance of a maze made of rocks. She walks the path, getting closer to the center, when she finds a human skull. She is of course made uncomfortable by it and hastily tries to run out of the maze. After making it about halfway out, she changes her mind and runs back, a sense of morbid curiosity overtaking her. She returns to the skull and starts crying. We see a shot from the top of the hill. A familiar boot touches the ground. For the first time ever, we see Azrael without the hood. He says,
"Don't cry. Look for a way out."
Helena listens and makes her way out of the maze. We're shown a maze that seemingly never ends. But eventually, Helena makes it out. Only she isn't a child anymore. She's in her teenage clothing and hairstyle. She looks around happily, but then sees a cross tombstone. This one is crazy. The comments have some pretty cool interpretations, which I think are a good read on the video. The fact that this labyrinth is made of rocks which you can easily just walk over could be a representation of being mentally trapped in your trauma. To an outsider looking in, you could just get over it. You could just change your outlook and be happy. But for someone there, even if those walls are short, they still feel seemingly impossible to escape, spiraling further and further until you find an answer, a way out. Initially, it's horrifying, especially as a child, but when you remain trapped in torment, you might become curious. Death, especially to a kid, is a horrifying concept. It's confusing, sad, and scary, especially when thinking about inflicting it upon oneself. When Azrael steps in and tells Helena not to cry, the O is a spiral, as we saw in Way Back Home. And when he says look, the 2 O's are an infinity sign, possibly representing the never-ending nature of Helena's torment. It's interesting that Azrael tells Helena to get out of there. This confused me at first, but if we're to look at Azrael as Helena's abuser, of course he wouldn't want her gone. He wouldn't have control of her anymore. Instead, he tells her to escape. She spends so much of her time doing this that once she finally makes it to the other side, once she's finally done escaping, she comes across a horrifying realization. Her childhood is gone, 6 feet under. She had her time of purity and innocence stolen from her, and now she's a teenager. What should have been her happiest years were spent escaping an abusive cycle. But as we know, this isn't even where it ends. It's truly tragic, and unfortunately, is something that thousands of people have had to go through. She was forced to grow up too fast, and didn't realize that she lost her childhood until it was too late. Going back to Helena's adulthood, we have mourning. This video is by definition I can't sleep. It shows Helena laying in her bed, unable to sleep. She's dangerously underweight and frail. As the video progresses, the sun rises and then her phone alarm clock goes off. She immediately turns it off. Laying beside her is a strange figure. Kind of looks like her little sister's mask, but it could also be a plush toy or something along those lines. This video seems to be a follow-up to the video Inside, where we see a very similar scenario. The video's message is pretty clear. Those who have undergone severe mental trauma often suffer from horrible sleep deprivation. The moments and memories play in your head over and over and over again on a nightly basis, leading to worsened mental and physical health. Truly is a torturous thing. The next video is pretty fascinating. It starts with a loading screen. First we've seen anything of the sort on this channel. We see Helena peacefully walking through a woodsy area. 24 seconds in, a headless scarecrow can be seen in the background. She keeps walking and crosses another headless scarecrow. Once she crosses the third, we cut back to another loading screen. Blood then splatters on screen while a blood-curdling scream plays. When it cuts back, Helena's headless body lays under the scarecrow, her head now filling the missing spot. I personally don't think this video has much of a deeper message, since it was uploaded on Halloween. I think it's just a fun little Halloween special. The loading bar reminds me of those old Newgrounds Flash animations, which is likely what this is trying to pay homage to. We've now reached the final video on I Can't Sleep so far. Uploaded 2 weeks before the writing of the script, Human shows a pretty simple yet somber image. We come from the point of view of somebody in a cage. Helena walks over and peers inside, looking concerned. She checks her surroundings, and then the video ends. It's pretty clear what this video is portraying. The cage might be in the same alleyway as those that we saw in No Way Home. Obviously, Helena's shock upon seeing a human, most likely a child given the size of the cage, is disturbing to say the least. This could imply that maybe she returned back to the alleyway to learn more, or something along those lines. So, as it stands, that's I Can't Sleep. You may be wondering about their Patreon, which I've been subscribed to for almost 2 years now. The I Can't Sleep Patreon doesn't really provide any additional lore or story elements, but it does show some sneak peeks to future videos and also some exclusive art. For example, we have a full shot of Helena's little sister, completely original pieces of art like Helena in Azrael's clothing, and my personal favorite, this rare happy photo of Helena sitting on a jack-o'-lantern while dressed as a cat. It's so great. I love seeing this character at peace for once. I Can't Sleep has still never interacted with the community and has still remained completely anonymous, but multiple people in the comments of my first video have claimed to be friends with the creator in real life. No one provided any proof of this, but their stories were all consistent. They all claimed that I Can't Sleep was essentially just vent art, a series made to represent the artist's trauma throughout her childhood to the modern day. Obviously, we can't fully confirm any of these accounts, but I do think they're worth noting, and further confirm what many of us already understood of the series. Now that we have a bigger picture of I Can't Sleep, let's put together the full narrative that we've been given so far. Helena/Neo was an innocent little girl whose father passed away at a young age. She lived with her neglectful mother, who let a large amount of abusive men into their lives. One day, while alone at a lake, a young Helena met her abuser, who went on to haunt her for the rest of her life. On multiple occasions, she was left alone and taken advantage of by this man. Around this time, her little sister was born. They were close, but unfortunately her sister too was a victim of the men that her mother brought into their lives. She began suffering from intense anxiety and nightmares, and begins to harm herself as a result of this. She grows up too fast, quickly losing her innocence and joy. Through her nightmares, her abuser is a commonly occurring figure. Most of her nightmares end in a gruesome fate for her. In the later years of her childhood, Helena couldn't take it anymore and decides to take her life. Her attempt was unsuccessful, leading her mother to put her in a mental institution. The institution ended up being the worst place that she could be, as during her time there, she was constantly experimented on and taken advantage of by the staff. Her little sister met the same fate. A doll-like mask now covers her face, likely a representation of the abuse that she's withstood. Eventually, Helena is discharged from the institution and tries to live a normal life. She starts attending either high school or college, but during this time, the nightmare doesn't end. It's shown that during this point, she has engaged in intercourse with somebody, but had her consent taken from her, which may have led to an unwanted pregnancy as seen in the video whole. Azrael remains in her life, and in some instances is kind to Helena. She's filled with the red of a rose, but it then gets spilled out out of her wrist into a bucket for Azrael. It's clear that Helena also suffers from a lot of religious trauma, as crucifixes are seen all over the series. She's haunted by constant nightmares during her time at school, which all ends in a tentacle monster lowering a crucifix to her. While standing alone at the edge of a building, she considers jumping, but then gets a flash to what the afterlife may look like for her. Wanting to avoid this reality, she doesn't jump. After having a particularly rough day, her return home from school devolves into a flashback of her time being institutionalized, which leads her to take a wrong turn and ends up in the wrong part of the city. After following bloody footsteps, she comes across a disturbing network of human trafficking. She walks to a place where she shouldn't be, but unlike usual, gets let go by the horrible creatures that reside. She starts hallucinating or suffering from schizophrenia, seeing things that aren't there, but ends up using her phone to truly assess whether or not the threat that she faces is real or not. She begins to become more hardened by these experiences, becoming braver and less bothered by the horrors. While working her job, she finds a visage of her mother and a little sister standing outside. This seems to be the first time that she's seen them since her childhood. Just like that, all the men who've hurt her return, as she's placed into the same spot where her life was ruined, with the responsibility of protecting her little sister. Her mother is apathetic and doesn't help them. The last thing we see is Helena figuring out exactly what was being held in those cages that she walked by, learning the truth of this disgusting world. And so that finally wraps it up for I Can't Sleep so far. I genuinely adore this series to the bottom of my heart. It's so good and it's so transformative and creative and unique, and it's incredible. It truly is. Apologies for how long this video took to make. Last one was made in 2023, but I really hope that this delivered, since I know a lot of people were waiting for it. Obviously, I Can't Sleep isn't necessarily over. Like, there's most likely going to be much more videos going forward. So I can't really say that I Can't Sleep is done. This is it. This is the story. But I think this is a pretty good interpretation of the events that are going on here. But if you disagree, let me know. I Can't Sleep is art. It's up to interpretation. And, you know, I've got my own interpretation of the stories based on what I've gone through and what I've lived through, and you may have a different one. So I'd love to hear all sides of the spectrum here. In the future, I'm most likely going to make a full series video, which would include more stuff that I Can't Sleep uploads going forward, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Obviously, this video had to be heavily censored, but if you want to see it uncensored, Patreon is in the link in the description. And by the way, thank you to all the patrons. You guys are incredible. Thank you so much. You're making this shit happen. So that's pretty much it. I've been Raymundo2112, you've been a great audience, and I'll see you all in the next one, which will be less than 3 months away. I promise that, trust me.